Hello, my dear listeners. Today I'd like to begin by sending a warm hug to 3 special people who left such lovely messages. Dawn Edwards from Oregon, Marsha Wilson from Sequim, Washington, and Dusty Johnson from Crow's Nest Pass in southern Alberta, Canada. It's such a joy to have you here with me. Thank you for being part of this special community. And what about you? Have you told me where you're listening from? Leave it in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories are reaching. And who knows, maybe your name will be featured in the next video too. Now then, let's begin today's story. The conference room on the 40th floor was all polished mahogany and ruthless efficiency. Maya Preston, 25, felt entirely at home here. She stood at the head of the table, presenting the quarterly report, her voice cool and measured, every syllable a testament to the iron will that had built her career. She was the proof, the definitive answer to the father who had abandoned her, that she didn't need anyone. Her eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on Thomas Ashfield, seated across the table. Billionaire, major client, always polite, always impeccably distant. He was analyzing the numbers with the quiet concentration of a predator assessing its prey. And then, without warning, without planning, an idea began to form in the sterile, logical center of her mind. It was an absolutely insane, desperate thought, so absurd that a hysterical laugh threatened to bubble up her throat. It was the most courageous, most reckless thing she had ever considered. She watched Thomas as he tapped a pen against his chin, the movement tranquil and composed. What if? The meeting ended. The room emptied quickly, the executives scattering to their next appointments. Thomas remained, gathering his documents into a sleek leather briefcase. Maya found herself walking toward him, her legs moving on autopilot, the polished floor cold beneath her expensive heels. Thomas looked up, his honey-brown eyes curious, waiting. "Mr. Ashfield, may I speak with you privately? It's urgent." The words were out before she could stop them. He paused, his hand still on his briefcase. "Of course, Ms. Preston." His voice was calm, a low resonance that always commanded attention. And in that moment, seeing the quiet expectation in his gaze, Maya realized there was no turning back. She was actually going to do this. "I need you to pretend to be my husband." The words tumbled out of Maya's mouth, raw and desperate, filling the sudden vacuum of the empty conference room. Thomas Ashfield froze. His hand, still reaching for the leather briefcase, hung suspended in the air. For 3 full seconds, he simply stared at her. His eyes, usually sharp and analytical, were clouded with confusion. Then, "I'm sorry." "What?" His voice was careful, measured, as if addressing someone who might be experiencing a sudden, unpredictable break from reality. The reality of what she had just said hit Maya like a physical blow. Her face flushed crimson. She closed her eyes, the shame burning behind her eyelids. She had said it, out loud, to one of the most powerful men in the country. The day before, the cold marble floor of her office had been the only witness to her collapse. The telephone had slipped from her trembling hands, clattering against the marble. The doctor's voice still echoed in her ears. "Terminal cancer. 3 months, perhaps 4 if we are lucky. I am so sorry, Ms. Preston." Maya walked to the 44th floor window, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. Christmas lights were already being strung across the skyscrapers, but she felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. Her grandfather. The man who had raised her, who had been there for every school play her father missed, who had dried her tears when she realized her father wasn't coming back. The man who was her anchor, her safe harbor, was dying. She left the office in a daze, ignoring her assistant's questions about the 6 o'clock meeting. She drove to his small, cozy house, the one that always smelled of cinnamon and unconditional love. He was on the porch, a thick wool blanket draped over his legs. When he saw her, his face lit up in that familiar, pure way. "Maya, my girl, what a lovely surprise." She tried to smile, but the muscles in her face felt frozen. Her hands were shaking so violently that she hid them behind her back. They drank tea. Her grandfather spoke animatedly about the approaching Christmas, about how special this year would be. He didn't know that she knew. And then he said it, with that hopeful sparkle in his tired eyes. You know what I would really like to see while I still have time? You happy, Maya, married, with someone who truly deserves you, someone who makes you smile the way you used to when you were a child, you know. Maya's heart fractured into microscopic pieces. She drove back to the empty, expensive apartment she barely used, the one she had bought to prove she was successful. She looked around. Everything perfect, everything costly, everything utterly hollow. No photos on the walls, no life. Just trophies from a war she was exhausted from fighting. And then the realization struck her like a train. She was 25 and completely alone. No boyfriend, no love, no life outside of work. She had built an empire of solitude, trying to prove she didn't need the father who abandoned her. Her legs gave way, and she slid to the cold floor of the living room, hugging her knees to her chest. How could she give her grandfather the only gift he truly wanted when she hadn't even allowed herself to live enough to find someone? The thought of his hopeful, tired face was the final catalyst. She stood up, her body trembling, not with fear, but with a sudden, fierce determination. She would give him this. She would give him this final, beautiful lie. And only one man, the one man who embodied the stability and success she had chased her whole life, had the power to make this lie believable. She looked at the clock. She had a meeting with Thomas Ashfield tomorrow morning. The plan was insane. It was desperate. It was the only way. She was going to ask the fortress of ice to melt for her, and she would pay any price. Maya felt the blood drain from her face, but she forced herself to continue. Her voice, usually so steady, cracked as she recounted the story to Thomas. Her grandfather, the diagnosis, his final wish to see her settled before he passed. She carefully omitted any mention of her father. That wound was too deep to expose to a stranger. Thomas listened in absolute silence, his expression unreadable. Maya could not decipher the thoughts behind the honey-brown eyes. When she finished, the silence was so heavy it pressed against her chest, making it difficult to breathe. I know it's crazy, she whispered, looking down at her hands, which were now tightly clenched in her lap. I know I have no right to ask this, but I have no one else, and he has no time left, and Her voice broke completely. I just want to give him this last gift, this final lie that will make him happy. Thomas rose slowly, his movement deliberate. Maya was certain he would simply walk out, leaving her to deal with the humiliation of her desperate plea. Instead, he walked over to the window, his back rigid, hands shoved deep into his pockets. He was a statue of controlled tension. I am truly sorry about your grandfather, he said finally, and the tone was surprisingly genuine. But I cannot do this, Miss Preston. It would be unethical. It would not be right. Maya nodded, tears stinging her eyes. She was about to say she understood, that it was a mistake to ask, when Thomas turned back to face her. But, he said, the word drawn out slowly, as if being pulled from him against his will, I have a problem. A problem we might be able to solve mutually. He explained the situation, a crucial deal with Mr. Tanaka, a Japanese magnate whose traditional values dictated that he only closed deals with men who were visibly anchored by family. He insists on meeting my wife, Thomas stated, a hint of bitterness in his voice. He believes a man without family lacks moral grounding. And without this deal... He stopped, his jaw tightening, the frustration visible in the clench of his fists. Maya could barely process the information. The sheer audacity of the coincidence was staggering. So, are you saying... Thomas looked directly at her, the analytical gaze returning, sharp and intense. You pretend to be my wife. You meet my client. You convince him we are a genuine couple. And in exchange, I pretend to be your husband for your grandfather. The air between them became thick, charged with dangerous possibilities. Maya knew she should say no. She should recognize the madness of the situation, that a lie of this magnitude could only end in disaster. But then she thought of her grandfather's face, the hopeful light in his tired eyes, the little life he had left. "All right," she heard her own voice say, surprisingly steady. "I accept." Thomas let out a slow breath he seemed to have been holding for the entire exchange. He extended his hand across the table, formal and businesslike, as if they were merely closing a simple contract. But when Maya's fingers touched his, a jolt, a sharp, undeniable current of electricity, shot up her arm. She gasped, her heart hammering against her ribs. Thomas's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise and something akin to fear flashing in their depths. He felt it too. "We need to define rules," he said, his voice a little rougher now. "Clear boundaries." "Agreed," Maya replied, but she did not release his hand. Neither of them did, and Maya had the distinct, terrifying feeling that she had just made a deal with consequences she could not even begin to predict. The space between them, once empty, was now impossibly charged. "You don't even know my favorite dish." Thomas's voice was soft but firm as they sat in his penthouse 3 days later. Maya had a notepad open, pen in hand, treating the entire scenario like a business meeting, because that was the only way she knew how to manage chaos. Thomas gently took the notepad from her hand. "Real couples don't make lists of facts about each other, Maya. They live." There was a hint of frustration and something else, a quiet challenge in his tone. "Your grandfather will see through a memorized recitation in 5 minutes. He suggested they spend time together, dinners, outings, real conversations. We need to look comfortable with each other, as if we know each other deeply." Maya resisted at first. She had work, reports, meetings. But Thomas was persistent in a quiet, determined way that chipped away at her defenses. Their first dinner was a disaster. Maya checked her phone every 5 minutes until Thomas gently took the device from her and turned it off. "The world will not end if you take 2 hours," he said, his voice a low invitation. "Trust me." And Maya realized, with a disturbing shock, that she couldn't remember the last time she had genuinely talked to someone without thinking about work. Thomas asked questions no one ever asked her, not about career or ambition, but about small things. "What was your favorite book as a child? If you could be anywhere right now, where would it be? When was the last time you laughed until your stomach hurt?" Maya didn't have answers for half of them, and that frightened her more than any failed merger ever could. On the third night, Thomas took Maya to an unexpected place, not a fancy restaurant, but an outdoor ice rink set up for Christmas. Maya looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "I haven't skated in 10 years, maybe more." "Exactly," Thomas replied, already lacing up his skates. "When did you stop doing things just because they were fun?" The question hit Maya like a physical blow. She couldn't remember. Thomas pulled her onto the ice. Maya was terribly awkward, clinging to his arm to keep from falling. She expected him to become impatient, but he just laughed. A warm, genuine sound that made something strange happen in her chest. "Let go," he encouraged. "You don't have to be perfect all the time, Maya." Perhaps it was the Christmas air, or the music playing, or simply the exhaustion of years spent trying to control everything. But Maya let go. She stopped trying to do it right, and just skated, stumbling and laughing when she fell, allowing Thomas to lift her. And for the first time in years, she felt light. As they left the rink, still laughing, Thomas casually took her hand, and Maya noticed he did it without thinking, a natural gesture between them now. She looked down at their intertwined fingers and felt panic surge. Not the panic of fear, but the panic of something far more dangerous. Hope. This was not real. This was rehearsal, preparation. When it was over, Thomas would return to his billionaire life, and she would return to her empty offices. But as she looked up at him, guiding her through the crowd, protective and present in a way no one ever had been, Maya had the terrible suspicion that her heart had missed the memo about this being pretend. "He's here." Maya stood in the restroom of the high-end restaurant, staring at her pale reflection in the mirror, her hands gripping the cold marble sink. On the other side of the door, Mr. Tanaka was seated with Thomas, waiting to meet the wife. This was the test. The first real test. If she failed this, Thomas lost the deal, and she lost the only chance to give her grandfather what he wanted. Her phone vibrated. A text from Thomas. "Breathe. You got this. I'm here." Maya didn't know why those last 3 words made all the difference, but they did. They were an anchor in the storm of her anxiety. She walked out of the restroom and approached the table. Mr. Tanaka rose, a man in his late 60s with assessing eyes. Thomas also stood, and when his gaze met hers, there was a reassuring intensity that calmed Maya's nerves instantly. He extended his hand, and she took it, allowing him to guide her to the chair. "Mr. Tanaka, this is my wife, Maya." The word wife slipped so naturally from his lips that even Maya almost believed it. The dinner began. Mr. Tanaka asked questions, how they met, how long they had been married, their plans for the future. Maya answered, sticking to the script they had rehearsed. But then he asked a question they hadn't anticipated. "And what does Mrs. Ashfield love most about her husband?" Maya froze. She was supposed to say something generic. He's kind, intelligent, successful. But Thomas's eyes were locked on hers, and something compelled her to speak the truth. "He sees me, not what I do or what I've achieved, but who I am, or who I used to be. He's helping me find that person again." The silence that followed was heavy. Thomas was looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. Mr. Tanaka smiled for the first time, a genuine warmth spreading across his face. "That is true love." After Mr. Tanaka departed, approving the deal with unprecedented enthusiasm, Thomas and Maya remained alone at the table. "You were incredible," he said. "But what you said about me seeing you, were you just acting?" His voice was careful, but something vulnerable flickered beneath the surface. Maya looked down at her hands. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "At first I was going to say something generic, but then I thought about what has actually happened these past few weeks. How you don't judge me for working so hard. You just gently show me that there are other things too. And no one has ever..." She trailed off, emotion closing her throat. "No one has ever cared enough to do that." Thomas reached across the table and took her hand. It wasn't a rehearsed gesture. It was real. "I care," he said simply. "Perhaps more than I should, considering our arrangement." In the car ride back, neither of them spoke. The tension was different now, charged with unspoken truths. When they stopped outside Maya's apartment, Thomas turned to her. "Next up is your grandfather. Are you ready?" Maya should have said yes. She should have been focused on the task ahead. But all she could think about was his hand still holding hers, the heat radiating from that simple touch, and how this was supposed to be acting. But it didn't feel like acting. Not at all. "Maya?" Thomas pressed, concern in his voice. She blinked, forcing herself to focus. "Yes, tomorrow. We visit my grandfather tomorrow." But as she exited the car and walked up to her empty apartment, Maya knew she had crossed an invisible line tonight, and she wasn't sure she could ever go back. Maya stood paralyzed in front of her grandfather's house, Thomas's hand warm and solid in hers. She couldn't make her feet move. "I can't do this," she whispered, the panic tightening her throat. "What if he notices? What if he knows I'm lying to him?" Thomas squeezed her hand gently. "Look at me." She obeyed, meeting his honey-brown eyes. "We are not lying about what matters. I care about you. That is real. He will see that, because it is true." And Maya realized, with a startling jolt to her heart, that he was right. Whatever this was between them, it was no longer entirely fake. The grandfather opened the door, and his entire face lit up when he saw Maya, and then Thomas. "Grandpa," Maya said, her voice trembling only slightly. "This is Thomas Ashfield, my fiancé." She watched her grandfather's face process the words, saw the exact moment pure joy flooded his tired eyes. "Fiancé?" he repeated, and then he was pulling Maya into a tight hug, laughing and crying all at once. "Oh, my girl, my precious girl." When he pulled back, there were tears streaming down his wrinkled face. He turned his attention to Thomas, assessing him carefully. "Do you love my granddaughter?" It wasn't a casual question. It was a test. Thomas didn't hesitate. "With all my heart, sir." And the way he said it, looking directly into the older man's eyes, made even Maya believe it. The grandfather smiled, satisfied, and ushered them inside. During lunch, the grandfather told stories of Maya as a child, how she used to draw for hours, creating entire worlds on paper, how she swam in the lake every summer until her skin was wrinkled, how she laughed non-stop reading in the garden. Thomas listened, fascinated, asking questions, clearly painting a picture of a Maya completely different from the rigid executive he had first met. And Maya felt something break inside her because she barely remembered that girl. She had buried her so long ago that it felt like hearing about a stranger. "Do you still draw?" Thomas asked later, when the grandfather was taking a quick nap. Maya shook her head. "I don't have time." "Or you don't allow yourself time," he challenged gently. Before Maya could answer, they heard a small sound from the bedroom. They rushed in and found the grandfather struggling to reach something on the high closet shelf, clearly in pain. Thomas immediately helped him back into bed, while Maya retrieved what he was reaching for, an old shoebox. "They're your drawings," the grandfather explained, breathless. "I saved them all. I wanted Thomas to see who you really are." Later in the car, Thomas was driving with the box of drawings resting in the back seat. Maya couldn't stop thinking about her grandfather's face when they left. So happy, so peaceful, more alive than she had seen him in months. "Thank you," she said suddenly, "for doing this, for being so perfect with him." Thomas stopped at a red light and turned to her. "Maya, I wasn't acting in there." There was an intensity in his voice. "I meant every word I said to your grandfather, about caring for you, about—" He paused, frustrated. "This stopped being pretend for me a while ago. I just don't know if it has stopped for you, too." The light turned green. Cars honked behind them, but neither of them moved, trapped in that moment charged with truths neither was ready to admit. Maya woke up with the sun streaming directly onto her face, momentarily disoriented. She wasn't in her bed. She was on an unfamiliar plush sofa, covered by a soft cashmere throw. Memories of the previous night returned in fragments. After leaving her grandfather's house, she and Thomas had gone back to his penthouse to discuss the next step. They had opened the box of drawings her grandfather had insisted they take, and Maya had simply crumbled. Years of repressed emotion had poured out as she stared at the vibrant, joyful girl she used to be. Thomas hadn't said a word. He had just held her, silent and solid, until the sobs subsided. She must have fallen asleep sometime after midnight. He hadn't woken her, hadn't rushed her. He had simply let her rest. She should have felt embarrassed, exposed, but strangely she didn't. There was something profoundly liberating about letting someone see her cracks. Thomas appeared from the kitchen holding 2 mugs, a gentle smile on his face. "Good morning. How are you?" "I feel different," she admitted, taking the offered coffee. "Lighter, maybe." They drank in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Thomas casually dropped the bomb. "Don't go to work today." Maya laughed, thinking he was joking. "Thomas, it's Monday. I have 3 board meetings and—" "Cancel them," he interrupted. It wasn't an order, but an invitation, warm and sincere. "I spend the day with me. Let me show you something." Every instinct in Maya screamed to refuse. Work was her armor, her routine, her safety net. But she looked at Thomas, at the sincerity in his honey-brown eyes, and heard herself saying, "All right." It was the first time in 7 years she had missed work without being physically ill. Thomas drove them out of the city, the landscape quickly turning from concrete to rolling hills. He finally stopped the car next to a large, clear lake on the outskirts of the city. It was December, cold, but the sun was bright, and the lake was calm as glass. "What are we doing here?" Maya asked, confused. Thomas pointed to a small rental shack nearby. "Your grandfather said you used to swim until your skin wrinkled. When was the last time?" Maya felt a sharp pang in her chest. "I was 15. "Why did you stop?" It was a simple question, but the answer was complicated. Because after her father left, Maya decided joy was a weakness. That focusing only on success was safer. That if she didn't allow herself to want things, she couldn't be disappointed. But she didn't say any of that. She just shook her head. Thomas surprised her by taking her hand and leading her toward the water's edge. "Then, today, you start again." Maya hesitated, shivering just from the cold air. "Thomas, it's freezing." "It's just water, Maya. It's not a hostile takeover." He gave her a playful shove. And maybe it was the sheer absurdity of the moment, or the way Thomas looked at her, not with pity, but with a gentle determination to help her find herself. But Maya stripped down to her undergarments and stepped into the water. It was icy, shocking, and absolutely marvelous. She gasped, then laughed, a sound that surprised even herself. It was pure, unadulterated joy. And when Thomas dove in beside her, splashing water everywhere like a child, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in a decade. Pure, simple happiness. Later, shivering under thick blankets while sipping hot chocolate in the car, Maya looked at Thomas. His hair was still damp, and he was laughing at something she had said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Maya was hit by a terrifying realization. She was falling for him. Not the billionaire CEO. Not the partner in the arrangement. But the man who took her to Cold Lakes, held her when she broke down, and saw the girl she had hidden for so long. And this was not in the contract. This was not part of the plan. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for today, for helping me remember." Thomas looked at her, and the playful light in his eyes softened into something deeper. "Maya, I would do anything for you." And the way he said it, with that quiet intensity, made Maya's heart leap. She knew he wasn't pretending anymore either. The line between the deal and the truth had officially vanished. Maya was growing accustomed to the easy rhythm of Thomas's penthouse. He had given her a key last week, a simple gesture that felt heavier than any contract they had signed. She was looking for a pen, a mundane task, and opened a drawer in his study desk that she hadn't noticed before. Inside, tucked beneath some old financial statements, was a small silver-framed photograph. It showed a younger Thomas, perhaps 5 years ago, standing beside a strikingly beautiful woman. They were laughing, their hands linked. On the back, written in elegant script, was a date, October 12th. A strange sensation tightened in Maya's chest. It wasn't exactly jealousy, but a sharp, unwelcome curiosity. Who was she? And why was this memory hidden away? The front door opened. Thomas walked in, shedding his blazer. He stopped dead when he saw her holding the photo. The color drained from his face, leaving him stark white. "Maya," he said, his voice flat. He didn't need to ask how she found it. The silence in the room was heavy, charged with the weight of an unshared past. "Caroline," Thomas finally said, sinking heavily onto the sofa. He looked exhausted, suddenly older. "We were engaged." Maya sat beside him, maintaining a respectful distance, yet undeniably present. Thomas began to speak, the words coming out slowly, as if each one caused physical pain. He described Caroline, the perfect social match, the flawless facade. But she hadn't loved Thomas. She had loved the empire he was building. "3 years ago, I hit a wall," he confessed, looking at his hands. "A major deal collapsed. I almost lost everything, and Caroline left, without a backward glance." His voice was rough. "She told me I had chosen poorly, that she thought I was going to be someone important, but I was just ordinary, mortal." Maya felt a familiar sting of tears behind her eyes, not for herself, but for the profound wound he carried. Since then, Thomas continued, meeting her gaze, his vulnerability raw, I haven't let anyone close. Until you. He paused, taking a ragged breath. You want to know why I agreed to this absurd arrangement? It wasn't just about the Tanaka deal. It was because for the first time in years, when I looked at you in that boardroom, so desperate and brave and real, I wanted to try again. I wanted to believe that maybe not everyone was like Caroline. Maya reached out, her fingers finding his, intertwining their hands. The warmth of his skin was a stark contrast to the cold fear in his eyes. I am not like her, Maya said fiercely. Thomas, look at me. He obeyed, the vulnerability in his gaze absolute. If you lost everything tomorrow, the money, the businesses, everything, I would still be here, because the man I love is not the billionaire. The words tumbled out, unplanned, unstoppable. The truth, once spoken, felt like a physical release. It's the man who takes me swimming in freezing lakes, who holds my hand when I break down, who makes my grandfather laugh, who sees me. The silence that followed was absolute, the air thick with the unspoken gravity of her confession. Thomas stared at her as if she had just rewritten his entire understanding of the universe. You love me? His voice was barely a whisper, a breath of disbelief. Panic clawed at Maya's throat. She had broken the cardinal rule of the contract. She should retreat, apologize, call it a mistake. But she couldn't. She forced herself to hold his gaze. Yes, she whispered back. I love you. And I shouldn't, because it complicates everything. And it wasn't part of the deal. But She didn't finish. Thomas pulled her toward him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was neither gentle nor hesitant. It was desperate, deep, and fueled by months of unresolved tension. His hands cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. The scent of his woodsy cologne and the starched cotton of his shirt filled her senses, anchoring her to the moment. When they finally separated, both were breathless. I love you too, Thomas confessed, his voice husky against her lips. Since that day at the ice rink when you laughed and for a moment forgot how to be perfect. I fell completely. Maya felt tears, pure joy this time, streaming down her face. She leaned in to kiss him again, to lose herself in the relief of shared truth when his phone began to ring. They ignored it. It rang again and again. Finally, with a groan of frustration, Thomas pulled away just enough to grab the phone. What? His face changed instantly. The warmth of love was replaced by cold shock. He stood up abruptly, his body rigid, the phone pressed hard against his ear. When? How? A cold dread washed over Maya. She watched the color drain from his face once more, this time replaced by a grim determination. Thomas, what happened? He hung up, looking at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Shock, confusion, something much darker. Your father, he said slowly, the word heavy with implication. He found out about our marriage. And he's in the city. He wants to see you. Maya sat in the passenger seat of Thomas's car, parked across the street from the small upscale cafe her father had chosen. Her hands were shaking so violently she had to clench them into fists. 20 years. 20 years since he walked out the door and never looked back. 20 years spent building an impenetrable armor against the pain of his absence. You don't have to do this, Thomas said gently from the driver's seat. The scent of his woodsy cologne was a grounding presence in the suffocating tension. We can leave right now. But Maya shook her head. She had to do this. She needed to face the ghost that had haunted every decision she had ever made. No, she whispered, the word catching in her throat. I need to. She pushed open the door, the cold December air a shock against her skin, and walked toward the cafe. Robert Preston was seated at a corner table. Maya barely recognized him. He was aged, gray hair, stooped shoulders, tired eyes. nothing like the confident, vibrant man she remembered from her childhood. He rose when he saw her. There was a fragile mix of remorse, hope, and fear etched on his face. "Maya, my girl, you've grown so much." His voice cracked. Maya stood rigid, Thomas a solid, reassuring presence at her side. "I am not your girl," she said, and she was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "You lost that right over 20 years ago." Robert flinched, recoiling as if slapped, but he nodded slowly. I know, and you're right. He gestured weakly to the chairs. "Please, give me 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes." Against her better judgment, Maya sat. Thomas immediately took the seat beside her, his hand finding hers beneath the table. A silent anchor. Robert began to speak. He explained that he had been terrified when Maya was born, that her mother was strong, and he was weak. That when the marriage collapsed, he ran because it was easier than facing his own failure. "I abandoned you," he said, tears finally spilling onto his cheeks, "and there is no excuse, no justification. I was a coward." Maya felt the familiar coldness of her own emotional fortress rising, but then he dropped the bomb. "I'm dying, Maya." The words landed like physical blows in the quiet cafe. "Heart failure. The doctors gave me 6 months." He looked at her with those eyes she used to idolize as a child. "And I know I have no right to ask this, no right to show up now after all this time, but I couldn't die without telling you. I am so sorry, so very sorry. And I love you. I always did. I was just too weak to show it." Maya felt bile rising in her throat. He was asking for forgiveness now that he was facing his own mortality. Where was he when she was 9 and cried herself to sleep every night? When she was 15 and needed a father at the school dance? When she built an entire career trying to prove she didn't need him? "You don't get to do this," she said, her voice trembling with a rage that felt 20 years old. "You don't get to show up 2 decades later and expect me to just... What? Forgive you? Pretend everything is fine?" Thomas squeezed her hand, a silent reminder of his presence. Robert shook his head, defeated. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth, that the mistake was mine, not yours. You were never the problem, Maya. I was." Maya shot up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I need to get out of here." She was halfway to the door when she heard her father's voice one last time, softer now, filled with genuine regret. "I heard about your marriage, about Thomas, and I want you to know I'm happy you found someone who clearly loves you the way you deserved to be loved all along." Maya didn't turn around. She couldn't. If she turned, he would see the tears that were finally threatening to break through her control. She walked out of the cafe, Thomas right behind her. In the car, she finally shattered. Years of anger, pain, and abandonment poured out in violent, gut-wrenching sobs. Thomas didn't try to fix her. He simply held her, letting her break, his arms a strong, silent refuge. The scent of his cologne, usually a comfort, was now mingled with the sharp, metallic tang of her own grief. "I hate him," she choked out against his chest. "But he's dying and I don't know what to do." "You don't have to decide now," Thomas murmured, his voice deep and steady. He kissed the top of her head. "Whatever your choice, I will be right here beside you. Forever." It was December 20th. Maya sat on the floor of Thomas's living room, surrounded by boxes of Christmas decorations. They had decided to decorate the penthouse for a small celebration with her grandfather. It might be his last Christmas, and Maya was determined to make it perfect. She held a delicate silver ornament in her hands, but her eyes were unfocused. She couldn't stop thinking about her father, about his words, and the genuine remorse she had seen in his tired eyes. The memory of his confession, "I'm dying, Maya," was a heavy stone in her stomach. Thomas walked in from the kitchen, carrying 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. He paused at the doorway, observing her silence. He knew her well enough now to recognize the signs of a mind lost in thought. He sat down beside her on the thick rug. the warmth of his presence a comfort. "Where are you?" he asked gently, nudging her shoulder. Maya sighed, placing the ornament back in the box. "I'm 7 years old and it's Christmas Eve." She told him the memory. Her father had promised to take her to see the city lights. She waited all night, coat on by the front door. He never showed. "I fell asleep on the sofa waiting," she whispered, the memory still sharp. "And when I woke up he called, saying he had a work emergency. But I heard the guilt in his voice. He had just forgotten." She looked at Thomas, her eyes pleading for an answer he couldn't give. "How do I forgive someone who broke so many promises? But how do I not forgive someone who is dying and genuinely remorseful?" Thomas was silent for a long moment, choosing his words with care. He didn't offer platitudes. "Maya, there is no right answer here. Forgiveness isn't about him deserving it. It's about you finding peace. If forgiving him frees you, then forgive him. If not forgiving him is what you need to move forward, that's okay too." He took her face gently between his hands. His touch was warm and steady. "Whatever you decide, you are not alone in this. Not anymore." The sincerity in his eyes made her heart ache with gratitude. The moment of quiet intimacy was shattered by the insistent ring of her phone. It was her grandfather. His voice, though weak, was unusually animated. "Maya, my dear, I've invited a surprise guest for Christmas. I hope you don't mind." "Of course not, Grandpa." "Who?" There was a pause on the line, a hesitation that made the hairs on the back of Maya's neck stand up. "Your father. Robert called me. We talked for hours. And Maya, he has changed. Or maybe he's finally grown up. But he wants to make amends. And I thought, maybe at Christmas, with everyone together." Maya felt the floor drop out from beneath her. "You invited my father?" Her voice was more brittle than she intended. "Without asking me? I know you're angry, darling, but life is short. Believe me, I know that better than anyone now. And holding on to grudges? It only hurts you." Her grandfather coughed, a painful, rattling sound. "Please, Maya, give him a chance." How could she refuse what might be her grandfather's last request? After she hung up, Maya looked at Thomas, panic clouding her vision. "I can't do this. I can't sit at the same table as him and pretend everything is fine." "Then don't pretend," Thomas said, pulling her close. "Be honest. Tell him exactly how you feel, but—" He hesitated, his gaze intense. "Also listen to him, Maya. Truly listen. Not for your father, but for yourself. So you can close this chapter, however you need to." Maya knew he was right, but knowing didn't make it easier. "What if I can't forgive him?" she whispered, the fear of failure evident in her tone. "What if I'm a bad person for not being able to?" Thomas pulled her fully into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. The familiar, comforting scent of him enveloped her. "You are not a bad person. You are human, and whatever decision you make, I will be right here beside you. On Christmas, and every day after." It was Christmas Eve, and Maya was having a full-blown panic attack in Thomas's penthouse bathroom. In 2 hours, they were due at her grandfather's house. Her father would be there, and somehow, she had to survive it. She was dressed in a sleek, emerald green dress, but her face was blotchy and streaked with tears. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the cold marble walls. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to force the air back into her lungs. A gentle knock sounded on the door. "Maya, can I come in?" It was Thomas. She opened the door just enough for him to see her crumpled form. Without a word, he stepped inside, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, and sat beside her on the cold marble floor. He pulled her into his arms, letting her hide her face against his crisp white shirt. "Tell me something good," Maya whispered against his chest, her voice muffled. "Anything." Thomas thought for a moment, his hand stroking the back of her head. "You remember when they asked me at the Tanaka dinner what I loved most about you?" Maya nodded faintly. I said you saw me, but there's something else. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his honey-brown eyes. You are the bravest person I have ever known. You survived things that would break other people. You built an entire life from scratch. And now you're about to face the biggest demon of all. And Maya? He made her look at him. You're going to survive this too. Because that's what you do. You survive. And I will be there with you every second. Maya felt something settle inside her. The fear didn't vanish, but it became manageable, knowing she wasn't facing it alone. They arrived at her grandfather's house. Maya saw her father's rental car parked in the driveway. Her legs nearly gave out, but Thomas's hand was a solid, warm weight on her elbow. Breathe, he murmured. I am here. When they stepped inside, her grandfather was in the living room with Robert. But there was another person there too, a woman in her early 40s, with kind, intelligent eyes. Robert stood up when he saw them, visibly nervous. Maya, this is Jennifer, my wife. Maya's world stopped spinning. Your what? Robert rushed on, desperate to explain. We got married 3 years ago. I didn't tell you because I didn't think you'd want to know. But Jennifer insisted she needed to meet you. She made me see how much I missed, how much I messed up. Jennifer approached, and there was a genuine kindness in her eyes that disarmed Maya's anger momentarily. Maya, I know I have no right to be here, but I need you to know. Robert talks about you every day. He carries a photo of you at 7 in his wallet. He never stopped loving you, even when he was too much of a coward to show it. She looked pointedly at Robert. And he is trying, truly trying to be better. Maya didn't know what to feel. Rage that he had built a new life while abandoning her? Relief that he wasn't completely alone? Why now? She asked, her voice cracking. Why do you want to be a part of my life now? Robert took a step forward, tears welling in his eyes. Because Jennifer made me realize I was dying twice. Physically from my heart, but also spiritually from regret. And she said if I only had months left, I needed to at least try to make amends. Even if you never forgave me. The dinner was tense, but not disastrous. Her grandfather kept the conversation flowing. Thomas was a constant, reassuring presence, his hand finding hers under the table whenever she needed grounding. And Robert? Robert was different, humble, broken in a way that felt genuine. After dinner, when her grandfather was dozing and Jennifer was helping Thomas with the dishes, Maya found herself alone with her father in the quiet winter garden. The stars were bright, the air was cold, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Robert broke the silence. I don't expect your forgiveness, Maya, but I want you to know, seeing the woman you've become, strong and successful and loved by a good man, it is my only consolation, because it means my absence didn't break you. You flourished in spite of me, not because of me. And that, his voice broke, that is all a failing father could ever hope for. Maya felt tears burning behind her eyes. She didn't know if she had forgiven him. She wasn't sure she could. But for the first time, she felt the white-hot rage begin to dissolve into something softer. Not forgiveness yet, but perhaps, eventually, peace. It was Christmas morning, and Maya woke up in Thomas's penthouse. She had been sleeping there almost every night now, in his bed, in his arms. The morning sun streamed through the panoramic windows, bathing the room in a soft golden light. For a perfect, suspended moment, everything felt right with the world. Then the realization hit her, sharp and cold. The agreement was supposed to be temporary. Tanaka had closed the deal. Her grandfather had seen her married. The reasons they started this charade no longer existed. A cold terror settled in her stomach. She wasn't ready for this to end. She wasn't ready to lose Thomas. Downstairs over breakfast, Thomas was quiet, clearly wrestling with something. Maya was equally silent, both of them circling the elephant in the room. Finally, Thomas cleared his throat, placing his coffee cup down with a decisive click. Maya, we need to talk about... About us. About what happens now. Her heart plummeted. He was going to end it. Of course he was. The deal was done. Why would he continue? I know, she said quickly, rushing the words out before he could continue, before he could say the words that would break her. The agreement is over. You held up your end. I held up mine. It makes sense that— I don't want to end it, Thomas interrupted, the intensity in his voice stopping her mid-sentence. Maya, I never wanted this to be temporary. Not since that night you slept on my sofa with your sketches spread around. Not since I saw you laugh on the ice. Not since I realized that for the first time in years, I woke up happy because I knew I would see you. He took her hands, his grip firm. I want this to be real. Completely real. I want to marry you for real, not in a pretense. I want to wake up every day with you beside me. I want to build a life that is ours. Maya should have been radiant. She should have been saying yes immediately. Instead, panic surged, tightening her chest. Thomas, you don't understand. I can't do this. He recoiled slightly, confusion and pain flashing across his face. What do you mean? I'm so afraid, she admitted, tears starting to fall, blurring the edges of the perfect Christmas morning. Afraid you'll realize I'm too messy, too broken. Afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize you can have someone better, someone who doesn't come with all this baggage from her father and this inability to fully trust. Her voice broke. Caroline left you when things got difficult. My father left me because I wasn't enough. And I can't survive you leaving me too, Thomas. So maybe it's better we end it now, before I fall more in love than I already am. Thomas looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something that surprised her completely. He laughed. It wasn't cruel, but soft, laced with affection. Maya, do you think I'm not scared too? Do you think I don't wake up every day terrified that you'll realize you can have someone funnier, someone less of a workaholic, someone who doesn't come with a traumatic ex-fiancé and trust issues? He framed her face with his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. We are both messy. We are both broken in places. But know this, you have seen me at my worst. You've seen my scars, and you still chose to stay. Just as I've seen yours and chosen to stay. That is not weakness, Maya. That is love. Maya looked at him through her tears, seeing the absolute truth in his eyes. You really want this? Even knowing everything? Especially knowing everything, he replied without hesitation. And then he was kneeling in front of her, right there in their kitchen, the Christmas morning sun bathing them in light. He pulled a small box from his pocket, a box Maya realized he must have been carrying for days, waiting for the right moment. Maya Preston, nothing about us has been conventional. We started with a lie and found the truth. We pretended to be in love and fell for real. And I don't want to pretend anything anymore. He opened the box, revealing a simple but stunning solitaire diamond ring. Marry me, for real this time, not for your grandfather, not for a business deal, but because when I picture my future, you are in every single part of it. Maya couldn't speak past the rush of emotion, so she simply nodded. She nodded and nodded and nodded until Thomas was standing, sliding the ring onto her finger and pulling her into a kiss that tasted of tears, laughter, and promises. 3 days after Christmas, Maya was at the hospital beside her grandfather's bed. He had suffered an episode overnight. His heart had nearly given out. The doctors had stabilized him, but they were clear. It was a matter of weeks now, perhaps days. Her grandfather was awake but weak, his hand resting in hers. Don't cry, my girl, he whispered, his voice barely a rasp. I am at peace. I saw you happy. I saw you loved. It is all I could ever want. But Maya wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to say goodbye to the only true father figure she had ever known. Thomas stood on the other side of the bed, his constant presence anchoring Maya. Her grandfather looked between the two of them and smiled weakly. I knew, he said, his voice barely audible. From the first moment I saw you two together. That wasn't pretense. You loved each other and didn't even know it yet. Maya blinked in surprise. You You knew we were pretending." Her grandfather chuckled, a sound that quickly turned into a cough. "I am old, not stupid. I saw how you looked at each other trying to figure out your own feelings. It was beautiful to watch, like seeing two puzzle pieces finally finding their missing match." He squeezed Maya's hand weakly. "And I'm glad I lied, because if I hadn't pressured you about marriage, you never would have asked him for help, and you never would have found each other." There was a hesitant knock on the door. Robert stood there looking fragile and out of place in the sterile hospital hallway. "They said I could. If it's okay, I'd like to see my father." Because Maya had forgotten, her grandfather was Robert's father too. They shared this man who was leaving them. Her grandfather looked at Robert, and then back at Maya. "Maya, darling, I need to talk to you. About forgiveness." His breathing was labored. "I carried anger over what your father did to you. For years I didn't speak to him. But when I heard I was dying, I realized the anger only stole time from me. Time I could have spent getting to know my son again, being a bridge between you." He coughed, and Maya helped him sip water. "Forgiveness is not saying what he did was okay. It's letting go of the poison that is killing you inside." Her grandfather looked at Robert, who was silently weeping by the doorway. "I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace." He turned his attention back to Maya. "You don't have to forgive him. But consider this. Do you want to carry that rage for the rest of your life? Or do you want to be free?" Maya looked at her father, truly seeing him for the first time, not the giant who abandoned her, but a broken, flawed man, awkwardly trying to make amends when it was far too late. And something shifted inside her. Not complete forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of it. "You can come in," she said to Robert. Her voice was careful but not cruel. But only because Grandpa asked. In the minutes that followed, something extraordinary happened. Her grandfather, drawing strength from somewhere deep within, spoke to both of them, to the son who disappointed and the granddaughter who was disappointed. He shared stories. He urged them to make peace. And somehow, in that hospital room under harsh fluorescent lights, a broken family began to heal. Not completely. The scars were still there. But there was movement towards resolution. When her grandfather finally drifted off to sleep, exhausted but peaceful, Maya and Robert stood on opposite sides of the bed. A heavy silence lay between them. Then Robert spoke. "Thank you for letting me in. I know I didn't deserve it." Maya looked at him, really looked, and saw not the father who abandoned her, but a frail dying man trying to make peace before his time ran out. "I'm still angry," she said honestly. "And it will take time. Maybe years. Maybe forever. But," she took a deep breath, "I'm willing to try. Not for you. For me. Because I don't want to die one day carrying this." It was the start. Just the start. But it was everything. It was January 3rd when Maya received the call. She was in the kitchen with Thomas, making breakfast, laughing over something silly, when the phone rang. It was the hospital nurse. Her voice was gentle but firm. "Miss Preston, you should come. Your grandfather is asking for you." Maya knew what that meant. This was the end. The mug she was holding slipped from her hand, shattering on the tile floor. Thomas was already grabbing the car keys. When they arrived at the hospital, Robert was already there, sitting beside her grandfather's bed. They exchanged a look, not quite warmth, but not hostility either. A silent acknowledgement of shared grief. Her grandfather was awake, but it was obvious that every breath was a struggle. "Maya," he whispered when he saw her. She rushed to his side, grasping his hand. "I'm here, Grandpa. I'm here." He smiled, that smile that always lit up his entire face. "My beautiful girl. You look so happy, so full of life again." His eyes, once so bright, were clouding over. "Promise me something." Anything, Maya sobbed. Promise me you will live, truly live. Not just work, not just survive, but swim in lakes and draw and laugh until it hurts. He looked at Thomas. Take care of her. Help her remember how to be happy. I promise, Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. Her grandfather then looked at Robert. And you, my son, be better. You have a second chance. Don't waste it. Robert was weeping openly. I won't, Father. I swear. Her grandfather closed his eyes for a moment, and Maya felt panic. But then he opened them again, focusing on something behind her. She's here, he whispered, wonder filling his voice. Your grandmother. She's waiting for me. There was no one behind Maya, but her grandfather was smiling with a peace and joy she hadn't seen in months. She says you look beautiful, Maya, that she's proud of you. Tears streamed down Maya's face. Tell her I love her. Tell her I miss her every day. She knows, her grandfather assured her. She always knew. His breathing was becoming shallower. It's time. I need to go with her now. No, Maya pleaded, clutching his hand as if she could keep him here by sheer willpower. Please, Grandpa, don't. But her grandfather just squeezed her hand one last time, looked at each of them, his granddaughter, his son, the man who loved his granddaughter, and whispered, I had a good life, and you made the end perfect. And then, with a soft final sigh, he was gone. The room became utterly silent, and Maya felt as though the floor had disappeared, as if everything safe in the world had vanished. The funeral was 3 days later. Small, intimate, beautifully simple, exactly as her grandfather would have wanted. Maya delivered the eulogy, and somehow managed to speak through her tears. She told stories of cookies and laughter, of a man who chose to love her when her own father couldn't, of how he saved her in ways he never knew. When she stepped down from the podium, Robert was waiting. For the first time in 20 years, he hesitantly opened his arms, and Maya, surprising even herself, accepted the embrace. It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was a step. It was something. He would be happy to see this, Robert whispered. Us trying. Yes, Maya agreed, he would. After the service, when everyone had left except Thomas, Maya stood beside the gravesite. Thank you, she whispered to the cold earth, for everything, for loving me when I felt unlovable, for giving me Thomas, for teaching me that it's okay to be happy. The wind blew, and for a moment, Maya swore she could smell her grandfather's cookies. She swore she could hear his laugh, and somehow, even in the pain, she found peace. 2 months later, Maya sat in front of a blank canvas, brushes and paints scattered around her. Thomas had converted one of the penthouse bedrooms into a studio for her. Perfect natural light, everything she could possibly need. But she couldn't make the first mark. She hadn't painted since she was 15, and now, staring at the white expanse, she felt something she hadn't expected. Fear. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of having lost the gift. Start, Thomas's voice said gently from the doorway. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just start. Maya dipped the brush into blue paint, the color of the lake where Thomas took her swimming, the color of the sky on the day she laughed for the first time in years. And then, without overthinking, she made a mark. And another. Suddenly, she couldn't stop. The images flowed, unplanned, imperfect, but real. She painted her grandfather smiling on the porch. She painted Thomas's eyes, a study in honey brown and kindness. She painted the child version of herself swimming in the lake, finally free. Hours passed. When she finally stopped, breathless and smeared with paint, Thomas was sitting in the corner of the studio, watching with something like awe on his face. It's beautiful, he said. You are so talented, Maya. Why did you hide this for so long? She looked at the paintings. Imperfect, raw, honest. Because after Dad left, I decided things like art were luxuries. That I needed to be serious, focused, successful. That joy was a weakness. Tears filled her eyes. I wasted so much time, Thomas. So many years just existing, not living. Thomas walked over, gently wiping paint from her cheek. But you are living now. That's all that matters. In the following weeks, something shifted in Maya. She still worked. She would always be ambitious, but now there was balance. She painted early in the morning, swam in the afternoon when she could, read at sunset, and surprisingly, this didn't make her less productive. It made her more creative, more focused, more whole. One day, Robert called. Maya, I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner. Just the three of us. No pressure, just talk. Maya almost refused automatically. But then she thought of her grandfather, of his last words about forgiveness. Okay, she said, but Thomas is coming too. Because she wasn't ready to be alone with him yet. Of course, Robert agreed quickly. Of course. The dinner was awkward at first, stilted, full of heavy silences. But then Robert asked about the painting, and Maya found herself talking animatedly. And Robert listened, truly listened. Your grandfather used to show me your drawings, he admitted, even after I stopped visiting. He'd call me and describe each one, always with such pride. His voice cracked, and I never had the courage to ask to see them myself. At the end of the evening, as Robert was leaving, he hesitated. Maya, I know I have no right to ask this, but would it be possible, maybe someday, for you to show me your paintings? It was a simple question, but it carried so much weight. It was an invitation to let him in, not completely, but just a little. Maya looked at Thomas, who simply squeezed her hand. The decision was hers. Okay, she finally said, but slowly, step by step. Robert nodded, tears in his eyes. Step by step is perfect. And Maya realized this was forgiveness. Not a grand moment, but small steps toward letting go of the anger, towards choosing peace over pain. She didn't know if she would ever have a real relationship with her father, but she was willing to try. And that was enough. It was June, 6 months after her grandfather's passing, and Maya was wearing a simple but beautiful white dress, wildflowers woven into her hair. She stood in front of a small lake, the same lake where Thomas had taken her swimming on that cold day that changed everything. He stood beside her in a light suit, his hair ruffled by the wind, smiling that way that still made her heart skip. Ready? He asked. To get married for real this time? Maya laughed, tears of joy sparkling in her eyes. More than ready. The ceremony was small, just a few close friends, Jennifer and Robert, who was frailer now but determined to be there, and a celebrant they barely knew. Nothing like the elaborate wedding they could both afford. But it was perfect. Utterly perfect. When they reached the vows, Thomas took both of Maya's hands. Maya Preston, you came into my life asking for a lie and gave me the truth. You taught me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about seeing someone's scars and loving them because of them, not despite them. His voice broke slightly. You taught me how to live again, how to laugh again, how to trust again. And I promise to spend every day for the rest of my life helping you remember how to be happy, how to be free, how to be you. Maya was openly weeping now. Thomas Ashfield, when I asked you to pretend to be my husband, I thought I was asking for a favor. I didn't know I was asking for my entire life. She wiped her tears, trying to find words. You saw me when I was hiding. You found me when I was lost. You loved me when I didn't think I was worthy of love. And you taught me that it's okay to be imperfect, that it's okay to stop fighting and just live. She smiled through her tears. So I promise to spend my life making you laugh, making you smile, and never ever forgetting that true love isn't about contracts or deals. It's about choosing each other every single day, forever. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Thomas pulled Maya into a kiss that tasted of pure joy. And Maya realized this was the difference. When When she pretended to be married months ago, it was performative, careful, controlled. But now it was real and messy and perfect. During the reception, if you could call it a reception, it was more of a picnic by the lake. Robert approached hesitantly. "Maya, I have something for you." He handed her a small box. "I found this while going through your grandfather's things. He wanted you to have it." Inside was a letter, in her grandfather's shaky handwriting. Maya opened it with trembling hands. "My dearest Maya, if you are reading this, it means I've gone. But I'm not really gone. I'm in every lake you swim in every canvas you paint, in every moment of joy you choose. I am proud of you. Not for your success, though it is impressive, but because you chose to live again. You chose to love again. You chose to forgive. Be gentle with your father. He messes up a lot, but he is trying. And be gentle with yourself. You deserve all the happiness in the world. And Thomas, take care of him too. You two are meant to be. Love fiercely, laugh always, and never forget, you are my beautiful girl forever. With all my love, Grandpa." Maya couldn't read it aloud. She just handed it to Thomas, who read it with a choked voice. There wasn't a dry eye when he finished. Months later, Maya stood in a small but elegant art gallery. It was her first exhibition, paintings that documented her journey from emptiness to fullness. There was a painting of her grandfather, one of Thomas on that first day at the lake, one of her child self swimming, and a new one, painted yesterday, her and her father, not embracing, but sitting side by side, a small bridge connecting them. It wasn't full reconciliation, but it was hope. Robert was there, looking at the paintings with tears streaming down his face. "You are so talented," he whispered. "I missed so much. So many years of watching you grow, of knowing this incredible person." "But you're here now," Maya said, and it was true. "And that is something." Thomas walked up, wrapping his arm around Maya's waist. "Ready to go home?" She looked around the gallery, at the paintings that documented her healing, at the father who was trying, at the husband who saved her from herself. "Yes," she said. "Let's go home." And as they walked out, hands intertwined, Maya realized something fundamental. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to the father who abandoned her, not to the world, not even to herself. She was enough. She always had been. She just needed someone to help her see it. And now, with Thomas by her side, Robert slowly returning to her life, and her grandfather's legacy guiding her, Maya finally understood what it meant to be alive. Not just surviving, but truly, genuinely living. It was a year later, and Maya was in the garden of their new home, not Thomas's penthouse, but something smaller, cozier, with a huge studio and a view of a lake. She was painting, Thomas was reading beside her, and the phone rang. It was Robert. They talked now, not every day but regularly. He was sicker, his time running out, but there was peace between them. Not full paternal love. Maya didn't know if she would ever have that, but there was forgiveness. And for her, that was enough. "I love you," Thomas said suddenly, lowering his book. No reason was needed, just an affirmation. Maya smiled. "I love you too." And she thought of her grandfather, of how he had orchestrated it all somehow. The request to see her married that led her to Thomas, who led her to find herself again. He knew. Somehow, he always knew. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered to the wind. And if the wind responded with the smell of cookies and the sound of laughter, well, maybe it was just imagination, or maybe it was something more. Either way, Maya smiled and returned to her painting, because this was her life now, real, imperfect, and absolutely beautiful.